For those of you who are visiting, we're on TV. We're streaming. So we kind of have a schedule. That's why we sang until 42. Our praise team kind of has to make up the difference in there. Our sister church in Shoto tunes in at 40 minutes to 12. So we welcome you if you're watching. Theron and Sharon, you had an interesting week this week. They had a big move. They've been anticipating for a while. They moved from a perfectly good house to a shop. So I guess it's kind of like camping for a while till their house comes, right? Yeah. We're thankful that you've made that step. You know, we call ourselves a church family, and I hope we are. But as families, we often have to come together to discuss various things, right? You might get around the kitchen table, maybe in the living room, might be around a campfire out while you're camping. And we're going to do that a little bit this morning, gather around the table and chat. If you'll indulge me a little bit, I'm going to reminisce. In 1957, an evangelistic team came to Great Falls, and they were here for several months. And they rented a theater downtown, and the evangelist had all kinds of big pictures on the screen, and he had pictures of all the beasts from Daniel and Revelation up there on the big screen. And I got to tell you, it scared the hell out of an 11-year-old boy. And right into the baptistry. A lot of things have changed. I think there's probably only 2 people that attend this church today who were around then besides myself. That's Terry Iverson and J.C. Wiegand. In those years, I've seen a lot of pastors come and go. Seen a lot of people come and go. Last week, I was talking with an old friend who came back to visit. She said, I don't see too many people I recognize. I see a lot of people I don't recognize. And that just indicates the change that we have in our church family. So we have a lot of turnover. And that's not bad. People come and go. People move in. People move out. We're thankful for each one of you that are here today. The way we conduct our worship service has changed. Back in the day, I remember going to church, and you could go to almost any Adventist service, and we would open our service with, Carrie, the doxology, right? You don't even know what that is, do you? Some of you do. Yeah, I think it's the last song in the hymnal. Yeah. I remember as a young elder marching up the center aisle with the pastor to the tunes of the doxology. A few months ago, Bunny and I were cleaning out our garage, and I came upon my old Pathfinder uniform.
About the doxology, that was the first song our oldest son Jack sang off the top of his head. That's the first. It wasn't Jesus loves me. It wasn't. No. It was praise God from all
Right.
And he'd say, for whatever word he couldn't remember.
Yeah, if when you sang it every week, you got to know it. As I was saying, we were cleaning out the garage, and I found my old Pathfinder uniform. Khaki pants and shirt, black tie and belt, sash with badges on it, and a hat. And I don't think Pathfinders wear those uniforms anymore, do they? Do they? I haven't seen any. We used to do a lot of marching. Do they still march?
Yes, they do.
Okay. Well, that was a little nostalgia for me. Let's consider some changes that have happened more recently. These are changes that have affected not just this church family, but probably every church across the nation and around the world. 3 years or so ago, we were biding our time, waiting for a new pastor, and Mr. COVID-19 came along. And that changed everything, didn't it? We closed the church doors, and we all had to find another way to worship. And I don't know for sure how you spent your Sabbaths. Some, I understand, tuned in to 3ABN or Hope Channel or something like that. Maybe you found something on the internet. Maybe you had some CDs from camp meeting that you listened to. I'll tell you what Bunny and I did. We love to drive, and we enjoy our state, our beautiful state. So we would get in our car. We have a full tank of gas. We'd have a lunch, a stack of CDs, music and sermons, and away we would go. And we might travel 200 or 300 miles, and you'd say, why would you want to drive that far on Sabbath? Yeah, and you know, today's automobiles, they're as comfortable as your lounge chair in the living room, right? And I don't mind driving. I enjoy it. So we saw a lot of Montana on those Sabbaths when we couldn't be here.
I want to add something.
Sure.
When COVID hit for me, I was living a totally different lifestyle, and it's pretty much what got me to go to the river and live in my van and find Jesus again.
There you go.
So, I mean, it's amazing how it affected people differently. It brought me
Wonderful.
back to God. So.
Good. Well, I think it got a lot of people thinking. Quite often you'd hear the comment, is this the end? Yeah.
What did Peter do? He went fishing.
We'll talk about that. Yeah, I think, you'd hear that comment from a lot of people that you didn't necessarily expect it from. Is this the end? The unfortunate thing that happened as a result of this prolonged debacle was that we got in the habit of doing other things on Sabbath because we couldn't come here. And when they began to relax the restrictions and we could open the church doors and we could come back, it was limited. Some of us were wearing masks. We were separating so we weren't close together, protecting ourselves, hoping not to spread the virus amongst ourselves. Our numbers were small at first. I remember just a handful of people coming to church. They were scared to come. And it grew a little bit at a time. For a long time, we hovered around 30 people coming every Sabbath. And it's getting better. I love to see the seats filling up today. When all that happened, many of the functions that we were used to in our church ceased to happen. And when we came back in a very limited way. We just did the basics. And unfortunately, that struggle is continuing today. And I want to appreciate those of you who have carried on the things that we need every Sabbath. I enjoy being greeted at the door. I enjoy those of you who carry on a Sabbath school class, Magda. I appreciate the praise team, Carrie at the piano, and the people up here singing. Those are the basics. There's a few in the background. I think of Sam and Alice, who take care of our finances. Lynette prints a bulletin for us. Those are people that we don't see up front, but they're taking care of things for us. But when you get past that, nothing's happening. I appreciate, Cammie, that you are starting Sabbath school. That has not been happening, and our young people have not had anything to go to. So, how many of you enjoy swimming? I'll be honest with you, I don't. I'm not very good at it, and I swim like a rock. Bunny, on the other hand, swims like a cork. She can lay on her back and just float there forever. I said, if the boat sinks, I'm sticking with you, babe. If I lay on my back and float, pretty soon my feet go like this. And pretty soon I go from horizontal to vertical. And right down I go. So, when you find yourself in that situation, the boat sank and you're stuck in the water, what do? Huh? Dead man's float? Well, what is the swimming motion you do? Tread water. So, I was never in the Navy, so. Treading water is a survival mode, right? Do you go anywhere treading water? You're just keeping your head above water, surviving. You're not going anywhere. Perhaps you heard a few weeks ago, there was a fellow that fell off of a cruise ship. They didn't find him for a day and a half. And you know what he was doing? He was treading water, wasn't he? And praying. Yeah. So, if we're treading water but we want to get somewhere, what do we have to do? We have to start swimming, right? If we tread water, we're going nowhere. If we want to get to the shore over there or whatever, you got to start swimming. Swimming usually involves a goal, right? Maybe you're on the school swim team. The goal is to beat the other team, right? Maybe you're swimming laps for exercise. Or whatever it might be, but you're swimming, you have a goal where you're going, what you're doing. I contend that we as a church family have been treading water, so to speak. Ever since COVID came, we've just been making do, doing the basics. And I say it's time for us to get out of survival mode and start swimming. We need to have some goals. And I think that God has given us some goals. In John, we find a story that took place after Jesus' resurrection. The disciples and all of the followers of Jesus were kind of trying to figure out what was going on. They were in shock at what had happened. And Peter says, don't you love Peter? Impetuous, eager, first one to jump right in, first one to proclaim his loyalty to his Lord, first one to whip out his sword, is also the first one to deny him. So Peter says to the other disciples, I'm going fishing. Peter was a fisherman, right? He was a fisherman before the Lord called him. He says, I'm going fishing. And sometimes that's a good thing to do, Mark. Go fishing when you don't know what else to do. So the other disciples said, well, we're going with you. Here's a bit of trivia for you. Desire of Ages says that the boat that you see in the stories in the Bible that involved with Jesus was Peter's boat. Interesting. So Peter didn't sell his boat when Jesus called him. So it was right there when they needed it. Well, anyway, they all got in the boats. And they headed out. In the Sea of Galilee, they fished at night, not during the day. And they fished all night. How many fish did they catch? None. I'll tell you something. I'm not much of a fisherman. I don't have the patience to fish. If it isn't happening, I'm out of there. Fishing all night, not catching any fish, that would not work for me. So they were coming into shore. It was dawn. Night was over. There was a man standing on the shore. They didn't know who it was. And he calls out to them, have you any fish? And they said, nope, we don't. And he said to them, throw your net on the right side of the boat. So I don't know if there's any significance to the right side versus the left side. I don't know if they normally threw it over the left side, but he told them to throw it over the right side. Whatever it was, they threw it over the right side. They said, what do we got to lose? So they threw their net over the right side of the boat, and immediately it was filled with fish. So many fish they couldn't haul it into the boat. At that point, John recognized that it was Jesus. And he says to Peter, it's the Lord. Peter, you would expect this from him. He was fishing in his skivvies, so he grabbed his outer garment, jumped in the water, and waded to shore to see his Lord. And the other disciples followed him with the boat and the net full of fish. And Jesus invited them to bring some of their fish, and there at his feet was a fire, and they had breakfast together. Here's another piece of trivia. You wonder why it's there, but it's in John's book, and he was there. It says there was 153 large fish in that net. I thought that was interesting. After they'd finished eating, Jesus asked Peter, Simon, son of John, do you love me? Peter's answer, we all know. Yes, you know I love you. Jesus replied, feed my lambs. Again, Jesus asked Peter, Simon, son of John, do you truly love me? Again, Peter's reply was, Yes, Lord, you know I love you. Jesus said, take care of my sheep. Again, Jesus asked Peter a third time, Simon, son of John, do you love me? Peter was hurt at this point. He said, Lord, you know all things. You know I love you. Jesus said, feed my sheep. As we change from treading water to swimming, we need goals. And Jesus gave us some goals here. If you picked up on this, every time Jesus responded, it was different. The first one was feed my lambs. The second one was care for my sheep. And the third one was feed my sheep. I contend that each one of those means a different thing for us. What would you consider lambs? Children? Maybe babes in the truth? People that are just learning? He instructed Peter to take care of them. The next one was take care of my sheep. Didn't necessarily mean feed, did it? We live in a world where there are a lot of people who need care, and there's a lot of ways we can care for them. We need to be about caring for his sheep. And the last one is feed my sheep. I would say that means more mature people. We need to feed each other, and then we need to feed those outside. We live in the Golden Triangle, right? What does that mean? What is the Golden Triangle? For those of you that don't live here, that's more than that. The Golden Triangle is from Great Falls to Shelby to Havre to Great Falls. And that's a triangle. And that's one of the greatest wheat growing areas in Montana. I'll get out my illustrations here. Kernel of wheat. I can hardly hold it here, it's so small. But you all know what a kernel of wheat looks like. Just a little tiny thing. The farmer plants that kernel of wheat in the ground with a lot more. The rain comes and waters it, and he expects it to grow. When that lone kernel of wheat grows, does it just produce one more kernel of wheat to replace it? No, it doesn't. It grows a whole head of wheat with many kernels of wheat. So what does the farmer do with that? He takes one of those kernels, puts it in the grain bin for seeding for next year, and the rest he sells. So what do those kernels of wheat do? They might go to a mill where they're made into flour. And that flour is made into bread. And we eat it for toast for our breakfast, or sandwich for our lunch, or whatever it might be used for. The other morning, my wife fed me Zoom for breakfast. You know what Zoom is? It's just ground up wheat. So we feed ourselves and we feed others. You hear a lot about soup kitchens and the community feeding those in our community who are not doing well and don't have the resources. We feed each other. Do we feed spiritual food? And who do we feed it to? We go back to what Jesus said to Peter. We feed the lambs. We care for the sheep. We feed each other. Jesus also said, other sheep have I. Meaning there are other sheep outside of the fold that he wants us to feed also. We're not really doing that right now. We're doing the basics, and we need to start doing those other things. We need to be working outside of our fold. Now, I know that some of you are touching lives around you, people you work with, friends, neighbors. But as a whole, as a group, we're not really doing that right now. We need to be feeding the sheep, as Jesus challenged Peter. I've had numerous conversations with our pastor. He's an intelligent man. He's dedicated to leading us to be a functional, productive church. It's unfortunate he's had to be away for a few weeks, but he will be back. He's flying home tomorrow, in fact, and he will be in this pulpit next Sabbath. But he is anxious to get us back on track about our Father's business. He's been carefully getting acquainted with us, understanding us. You may have received a call or a visit from him already. He wants to understand what makes us tick. He wants to get us swimming. We have a lot of challenges around here that need our attention. I challenge you to be willing to step up and take an area that currently is lacking. I appreciate Cammie and the others who saw the need for the kids. That's what I'm talking about. Look around you and see what isn't being done. I can look at one thing. There's nobody sitting back there. We need that. That's just a simple little job somebody can do. Let's welcome our pastor and his wife back home with open arms and ask him, how can we help to get this church back on its feet? That's my challenge to you today.